welcome back to VID-O-RAMA, where we remember the VHS releases of the past in graphic detail. My name's Aaron Jones and I'm an artist, and on this channel I paint tributes to movies that we rented on video back in the day. Continuing on with my theme of painting a tribute to the movies that are dear or important to me, this time round I'll be painting a tribute to an infamous mockumentary that first and last aired on BBC One on Halloween night 1992. Of course, I'm talking about the infamous Ghostwatch. Now, I'm reluctant to call Ghostwatch overlooked these days, as it seems that each year more and more people are discovering it and giving it the recognition it rightly deserves. A quick search here on YouTube, you'll find countless videos of people watching it, reviewing it and discussing it in great detail. And so I did find myself asking, does YouTube really need another video about Ghostwatch? Simple answer, yes. Yes, it does. Ghostwatch is brilliant. I absolutely love this thing. I watched it go out live in 1992 and it stayed with me. It left an impression that 30 years on I'm still feeling. I formed friendships off the back of this thing, so yes, I think we should feature Ghostwatch on this channel, and so I would like to paint a tribute to it right now. Although I will add though, I have painted a tribute to Ghostwatch in the past. Ghostwatch, Behind the Curtains, a retrospective documentary that was produced by my good friend Rich Lorden, and it was released in 2012 on the 10th anniversary of Ghostwatch, and it discusses the making of the show and also its legacy. And if you open it up and have a look inside, you'll see this. I made that, I painted that, and here's the painting. Painted in 2010 specifically for the DVD and to mark the 10th anniversary of Ghostwatch, this illustration has since gone on to be used in countless magazine articles and blog entries, but I'd like to have it feature on the channel. So instead of going back and repainting it or improving on it as I did with the Halloween 3 painting, I thought I would try this. Let me show you. I painted this back in 2010 and I still feel quite nostalgic about it because it's around about this time that I established this style. But this is the idea. Taking the first painting and having other elements spill out onto a second and essentially creating a larger piece. Feature the house more here, but of course it's about Pipes featuring more because he's hidden in the other one and he's looming over the house. But I don't want it to look like two pieces, so all this will tie into the other. You'll notice that Mike Smith's arm carries on here. There's the house, and Pipes will feature more and loom over the house, and the newspaper cuttings and papers will spill out from the first picture. The main thing is that it looks like one single image. So that's the plan. Hope it's of interest. I hope you'll stick with me for the rest of the video. Sit back, relax, recount some childhood trauma and watch me paint an additional section, a continuation to my tributes to Ghostwatch. So the colours today will be Mars Black, Titanium White, Cobalt Blue and Cadmium Red. Now the main challenge today is going to be mixing this blue and matching it up with the blue that I used back in 2010. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it would be nice. As ever, the additional detail will be added with pens. So the plot for Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch is a television programme that's been broadcast live and hosted by Michael Parkinson on the BBC, and it sets out to prove the existence of the paranormal during a live investigation from number 41 Foxhill Drive, the home of Pamela Early and her two daughters Suzanne and Kim, who are living in what is considered to be the most haunted house in Britain, haunted by a poltergeist known as Pipes, named after the central heating system. Co-host Sarah Greene spends the night with the family at the house, and Craig Charles interviews the neighbours outside, while back at the studio Mike Smith oversees the phones and Parkinson chats to Dr. Lim Pascoe, a psychologist that has been working closely with the family. As Dr. Pascoe tries to convince Parky and the general public that ghosts are real, the show unlocks the house's dark past and Pipes' true identity, before it's revealed that Pipes is in fact using the show to create a nationwide seance to get into everyone's homes. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And as I said, I was there when it went out, forever making Saturday, October 31st, 1992 a memorable day for me. I'd always been an avid supporter of Halloween, particularly the custom of trick-or-treating, but being 13 I reluctantly accepted that I was too old to go trick-or-treating, and so this was to be my final night, my swan song. There was no school the next day, so I could stay out later with my friend Gwynfor and accumulate as many treats as possible. But I had set myself a time limit. I needed to have it all wrapped up by 9 p.m. because there was going to be a television programme on and I didn't want to miss it, called Ghostwatch. Having previously viewed the BBC's Crime Watch and Badger Watch shows, I believe the show to be in the same vein, and so we sat down as a family to watch the show with no idea that it was a pre-recorded drama. We thought it was indeed live and we were swept along with it. My brother and I were convinced that we could see the shape of a figure behind the curtain, and I remember asking at one point if we could actually call the show. At one point I actually turned to my parents and said, "If this is real, we're watching history." But as the show progressed and Pipes unleashed his powers and all hell broke loose, it became apparent to us that it wasn't real, but we enjoyed the programme nevertheless. But I was actually right though, it did make television history, as Ghostwatch became one of the most controversial British television shows ever, as the BBC had been inundated by phone calls and letters from viewers both angry and scared. The BBC was heavily criticised by the newspapers at the time for terrifying the nation. And so the Beeb vowed to never show it again, and even now at the time of recording this is still indeed the case. In Ghostwatch we're told that Pipes had 12 cats, and so when I was painting the original piece I hid various cats throughout, reaching the number of 8. Look through the painting, you'll find 8 cats. But now with this I'm presented the opportunity to add an additional 4 and reach the required 12 number of cats. Following on, Ghostwatch's origins start with its creator and writer Stephen Volk. Born and raised in Pontypridd, South Wales, Stephen Volk studied graphic design at Lancaster Polytechnic in Coventry, specialising in film, but he would subsequently earn a postgraduate certificate with distinction in radio, film and television studies at Bristol University Department of Drama. He was working in advertising, and at one point he was the copywriter for the Green Cross Code road safety adverts before he became a full-time screenwriter. With a particular interest in writing horror after being inspired by Nigel Kneale's Stone Tape, he submitted a screenplay, Gothic, a retelling of Mary Shelley's visit to Lord Byron at the Villa Diodati to Virgin Films. They picked it up and offered it to director Ken Russell. Gothic was released in 1986 to a positive response, and Russell would later credit the film for giving his career a second wind. Volk followed on with his next screenplay, The Host, which was directed by Penn Densham and released in 1988 as The Kiss. His adaptation of Dan Greenberg's novel The Nanny, which was originally to be directed by Sam Raimi, was instead directed by William Friedkin and released as The Guardian in 1990. So by the 1990s, Volk was firmly established as a horror writer with distinction when he pitched an idea for a 6-part TV series to the BBC drama's producer Ruth Baumgarten. Originally from Germany, Baumgarten had moved to England during an exciting time in television drama. The BBC had upped its game since the launch of Channel 4, and she was working as an academic and film critic when the BBC, who had liked her work, invited her to join and run the development for drama series and serials. She worked as a script editor, and before long she was producing the scripts she had edited. She was the producer on Frankenstein's Baby and Prince for BBC Screen 1 and Rasarina for Screen 2 when she met Volk to discuss ghost stories and the lack of horror in the schedules. Volk pitched the 6-part drama to her, which featured a paranormal investigator and a TV reporter investigating various cases, with the series concluding with all hell breaking loose on a live TV show for the final episode. Baumgarten liked the idea but questioned it being a 6-parter, and as Michael Waring had just become head of drama serials at the BBC and not as interested in horror, she mentioned that there was a slot available on Screen 1 and that the executive producer of that, Richard Brooke, was more open to all genres. So she suggested that Volk adapt his story and resubmit it to him as a 60-minute special instead. Volk agreed and reworked the final episode involving the live broadcast. Richard Brooke was indeed a big name in TV drama at this point. Born in London and educated at Eton, he left there at 17 and had gone on to work at Frank House's Oxford Playhouse in 1961. He would eventually leave the theatre and join the BBC as a trainee, working as a floor manager at various shows. Top of the Pops, to name but one. However, in 1970, his life changed forever when he was involved in a car crash that left him confined to a wheelchair. Now no longer able to work the floor, He worked as a researcher on Dennis Potter's Casanova in 1971, and then later as a script editor on 30-Minute Theatre and The Glittering Prizes in 1976. He actually left the BBC for 2 years to produce the landmark 8-part series Winston Churchill: The Wilderness Years for Southern Television in 1981. But when he returned to the Beeb, he would go on to produce 2 productions that would give Auntie a headache. The first was The Monocled Mutineer in 1986, starring Paul McGann as the British Army deserter Purty Topless. The press claimed that the drama was nothing more than left-wing propaganda by the BBC, and this was not the sort of attention the BBC needed due to it having its financing reviewed by the Conservative government's Peacock Committee at the time. It was also at this time that the Conservative Party chairman Norman Tebbit was monitoring the BBC for evidence of left-wing bias. The second time was Tumbletown in 1988 that starred Colin Firth. Once again, the press cried biasm at the BBC when it was revealed that they had just shelved the pro-Thatcher drama The Falkland Play, but run this one. Brooke said that he never set out to make controversial drama, but friends and family later said that he actually relished the controversy and loved it when the Daily Mail attacked one of his programmes. Nevertheless, Tumbletown went on to win a BAFTA award for Best Film Camera, Best Makeup and Best Single Drama. Brooke would use his award as a doorstop. He was then assigned executive producer at BBC's newest venture, Screen One, their flagship drama series, little knowing that he had another controversial drama in his future. He too liked the idea of Ghostwatch and greenlit the project, but now they needed a director. They needed Lesley Manning. Another born in Wales, Lesley Manning attended Bristol Art College with the intention of pursuing graphics, but one day she and a friend discovered a wind-up Bolex camera and they started to make short films and animation with it. Graduated with first-class honours and then moved on to work in film. Having taken a 2-week holiday job serving as cover for people in graphics at BBC Bristol, she did everything from cutting out birds and sticking them to Fablon to painting maps of the United Kingdom for studios. But it was editing that she loved, and she thought editing would serve as both experience and a leg up into directing someday. Armed with a film that she had made and had developed by bribing local BBC News film baths with a bottle of whiskey, she applied to the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield. She was accepted and was only one of 6 women at a school of 75. Then, having worked on 2 Australian feature films, she graduated and worked as an editor. Her documentary Love for Lindy, concerning a group of self-taught Lindy Hopper dancers, featured on Thames Television, and before long she was offered her first break in drama in 1988 by producer Caroline Alton, who hired her to direct an episode of the private detective series South of the Border. Having worked well together, Alton then had her direct the 3-part thriller Blood Rights, which Manning did during pregnancy. It was at this time that Altland worked out to the same corridor as Ruth Baumgarten, who was producing the feature-length Screen 2 drama My Sister Wife, which Manning would go on to direct. And it was during the production of that Baumgarten mentioned her complex ghostly project to her. Knowing that Manning had a background in graphics and animation, she knew that she would be perfect to direct Ghostwatch. Going back briefly to Volk's script, those of you out there that know their paranormal history will have no doubt recognised the similarity between the Early family in Ghostwatch and the Hodgson family, who were involved in the infamous Enfield poltergeist incident that took place between 1977 to 79. When a family endured a barrage of poltergeist activity, many of which were centred on the teenage daughter Margaret. The papers were involved, a policewoman gave a statement claiming she had seen something, and then the Society for Psychical Research was called in, and they recruited investigator Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair to document the entire incident. Depending on how you look at this, the Enfield incident was either the biggest hoax in paranormal history or the most underplayed evidence of the existence of the paranormal. The Enfield incident has since entered popular culture and featured on countless documentaries such as Strange But True, which it featured in '95. There was the television drama The Enfield Haunting, starring Timothy Spall in 2015, and it's also featured in The Conjuring 2 in 2016. But back in 1992, not every BBC viewer was familiar with the Enfield incident. Now with the script, Brooke loved the story but advised them to streamline it, and so Manning met with Volk and they did just that. The decision was made early on to shoot the entire film on tape, as it was the standard practice for live TV and would help establish the live look that they were going for. Always striving to make it look real, a request was put out for the public to share their ghost stories, and many did, recounting their own encounters with the paranormal in the form of a vox pop, which added an extra element of realism to the show. In their pursuit to make Ghostwatch seem real, it is without a doubt their choice of casting that made Ghostwatch work best. Having half the cast made up of presenting personalities that the British public assumed to be playing themselves was genius. They seem genuine, and this reels us in, or fools us if you like. Specifically Michael Parkinson. At this point in time, Parkinson was known as the King of Chat, having presented his chat show from 1971 to 82 and interviewing most, if not all, of the world's most famous people and establishing his relaxed style of interviewing. It's fair to say he wasn't associated with scripted TV as much. Despite appearing in a handful of commercials and one horror film in fact, briefly, Madhouse alongside Vincent Price in 1974. Likewise could be said for Mike Smith, who had always played himself on TV, including in BBC's own Rail Watch in 1987. Although his wife Sarah Greene had started out in various child acting roles and held a degree in drama and acted in such shows as BBC's daytime drama Together, The Swish of the Curtain and Doctor Who, when she became the youngest ever presenter of Blue Peter, aged 22 in 1980, it kicked off a very successful presenting career for her, and working on such shows as Saturday Superstore and Going Live and Hospital Watch, she was known to millions of us as a live TV presenter. By all accounts, it was Brooke that struggled with Ghostwatch's realistic format. With drama being his craft, he was not that familiar with the process of live TV and expressed concerns that it looked amateurish. But once he had been reassured that the unsteady camera shots and the people fumbling their dialogue was all done by design to help maintain realism, he was delighted. But it seems he did express concern at one point that, as a piece of horror, he didn't find it terribly frightening, and he was worried that the ending was somewhat comical. And so he requested that they up the scares. Following on from his request, they did just that, and soon after, Baumgarten showed it to her husband, who found it to be quite unnerving. And unnerving and unsettling would be a key feature in Ghostwatch. At one time, Volk even came up with the idea of having an ultrasonic soundtrack laid over the film. This would have emitted a sound that agitated dogs during the show. Now at this point I'm going to skip over the actual making of the show and instead urge you to check out Rich Lorden's brilliant Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains documentary that I mentioned before. Rich Lorden's commitment to this drama shines through. We hooked up through our love of Ghostwatch and we've remained firm friends ever since. But anyway, Ghostwatch was set to air on BBC One on Halloween night, and it's often wrongfully believed and at times reported that the heads at the BBC had no idea what was actually going on, and that the producers of Ghostwatch had somehow secretly slipped it through the back door in order to pull a prank on the public. This was not the case. It would have been impossible for a drama of this scale, at the cost it took to make it, to simply slip by unnoticed by the BBC. It would have been closely monitored from the moment the project was given the green light, and would have been screened first, and it was. And the powers that be did not express any concerns about it. They only requested one thing, that the credits be added at the very beginning of the show. They did just that. However, a fair few of the 11 million viewers that tuned in to see Ghostwatch that night managed to miss those opening credits. And a fair few of them had clearly not bought that week's Radio Times, myself included, that featured Parkinson on the cover. And so a great many went in believing it to be a live show. Now this is Orion, my faithful feline companion. She's 14, so she's pretty old. She's as deaf as a post, and unfortunately her eyesight is starting to fail her. She's been loyal and my friend all this time. In fact, I can remember she was sleeping by my feet when I painted the first Ghostwatch painting. So I thought it was appropriate, seeing as the paintings feature cats so heavily, that I get Orion to apply her paw prints to it as well. So I have this child-friendly, non-toxic poster paint. So we'll apply some to her paws, and we'll apply her paws to some choice sections of the painting. Is that okay? You're going to help me out? Let's do that. With so many viewers tuning in thinking Ghostwatch was a live TV show, their belief was further strengthened by the show's relentless attention to realism and detail that I mentioned. Baumgarten, who did not attend the cast and crew live screening, opted to stay at Television Centre to keep an eye on proceedings. Believing that people would in all likelihood call the number on the screen during the show, she had hired a small number of people to monitor the phones to either inform callers that the show wasn't real or document paranormal accounts on behalf of the Society for Psychical Research, with Maurice Grosse, that investigated the Enfield incident, in attendance. Baumgarten soon noticed that something was amiss when hundreds of phone calls from the public started to come in, either checking on everyone's well-being or wanting to be assured that it wasn't real, before the phone lines crashed due to the sheer amount of calls received. BT later reported that at least 500,000 people had tried to get through to the BBC before the lines failed, and so it seemed that many people had been fooled, and the next day the British press would once again lay into the BBC and accuse them of abusing the nation's faith. Now, I could be giving myself too much credit here, but I'm pretty certain that I'm the only artist on YouTube that is using a elderly cat as a paintbrush. So with that in mind, perhaps you might consider clicking that subscribe button. The BBC, no doubt delighted that the viewing figures were concerned about the bad press and considered Ghostwatch to be the best and worst thing to happen to them. The letters they received gave a mixed reading, tallying at 50-50, one half condemning them for making such a programme in the first place, and the other half praising them, regarding Ghostwatch to be the very reason they paid for their television licence. Nevertheless, everyone at the BBC quickly distanced themselves from Ghostwatch, and letting the programme makers take the fall. Then, shortly after, the press ran a story concerning 18-year-old factory worker Martin Denham, who reportedly had been so deeply affected by the show that he had actually taken his own life as a result of it. His grief-stricken mother and stepfather gave interviews in claiming that Ghostwatch had terrified their son, who suffered from learning difficulties and had the mental age of 13, to the point that he had become obsessed by it. And as he was living in a house with faulty central heating that caused the pipes to knock, this had exacerbated matters, and he ultimately hanged himself 5 days after the broadcast. The matter was soon raised before the Broadcasting Standards Commission, but they refuted the complaint on the grounds that the BBC had done everything they could to inform people it was fiction. So for 10 years, those of us kicking ourselves for not taping Ghostwatch when it aired were delighted to finally see Ghostwatch released on VHS and DVD in 2002, albeit by the BFI. We finally had the opportunity to re-watch and lay some spirits, or rather a spirit, to rest. It's since been re-released on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's aired internationally, becoming the subject of several blogs in which they chuckle and laugh at how Britain was fooled by what was clearly a film, and making the inevitable comparison to Orson Welles' radio broadcast of War of the Worlds in 1938. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but you really had to be there. TV was very different back then, and it was a more innocent time. Remember now, this was exactly 1 week after the introduction of Mr. Blobby to our screens. TV just didn't distort the truth, or at least we weren't aware of it going on. To some degree, I feel that going in knowing it was this show that fooled the nation deprives you of the impact it had on its original broadcast. A little like going through a ghost train with the lights on. But it really is still worth watching and re-watching, if only to see how it should be done, and how it clearly inspired such movies as the WNUF Halloween special and the more recent Late Night with the Devil. In 2017, IndieWire ranked Ghostwatch in their top 20 British horrors of all time, a film that at the time was viewed by 11.5 million, that only around 22,000 people complained. And so with that in mind, I am reminded of what TV magician the late Paul Daniels said when his own 1987 Halloween special sparked outrage with the press. He had simply set out to make an entertaining show, and he said, millions and millions of viewers and only hundreds of telephone calls, which I believe proves that most of the people accepted the show for its original intention. There we go. Thank you for joining me today and keep me company. As ever, I hope that was of interest to you, and I hope you approve of the additional painting. If so, let me know what you think in the comments, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's been a genuine pleasure going back and reliving my memories of Halloween 1992, and I'm delighted to be able to add Ghostwatch to the lineup. As I've said before, Ghostwatch is personal to me. It has me harking back to a simpler time, but also the people I knew then and the people I've met since. And I hope my fondness for it has come through in the painting and also this video. Thank you for joining me. And if this was your first time here, please check out the rest of the channel and like and subscribe and tell your friends about VID-O-RAMA. Until the next video, good night out there, whatever you are.